Meeting's already in session. If everybody could please rise to the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Starting off with public comment. Do we have anybody on the list to?
Do we need to officially leave executive session?
We did. We don't
need to take a motion.
Sure, we can come back. Do we have anybody sign up for public comment this time?
No one.
No. Okay, there is another opportunity at the end of the meeting as well. So we can go right on it in. First of all, tonight is going to be a very exciting board day meeting. We do have students with us tonight, which is really, really gratifying for all of us, and sure to see why we all do what we do, as opposed to just talking about the budget all the time. Speaking of which, the budget, we will be voting tonight on approving the adjustments that Dr. De Silva presented to us last week to make up for the $500,000 reduction from the Board of Ed's adopted budget to the Board of Financing budget. Next steps after tonight would be an annual town meeting on May 2nd at 7:30 on the 2nd at the Ridgefield Playhouse, where everybody can come hear the presentations one more time and an opportunity to comment. And then we'll go to the town referendum on Tuesday, May 10th. Also coming up in May, we will have Dr. De Silva's annual evaluation. We'll be doing that the second board meeting in May. That's all I have. Dr. De Silva.
Well, we hope everyone had a nice April vacation, and many celebrated a variety of April holidays, so welcome back. By the looks of it, I think everybody did have a great break. As our board chair mentioned, on May 2nd, we have the town meeting where the Board of Selectmen, I, and the Board of Finance present our budget, so we encourage those that are interested to come on out and watch. I think it's not too late, 7:30 maybe? The little ones can't come out, but your parents can. Seniors begin their internship on May 9th, so that's an exciting time. I hope that we have a presentation from Dr. Greenwood and the team to share all the different places they will go, as Dr. Seuss might say. Very, very exciting time for our kids, and certainly for those that they actually, those places where they engage with them. And I know that our kids get a lot, but so do each and every one of those locations, whether it's the schools or doctor's offices or labs. It's a good time. So looking forward to that. The Connecticut High School Coaches Association recognized two of our coaches. So I just want to take a minute to mention both of them. Kevin Callahan for football and Sean Gallagher for ice hockey. And that's it for me.
Great, thank you. Committee reports. I know we had a few committees last week, starting with budget.
Yep, we did have a budget and finance meeting. Ken was out, so I ran in air quotes. We did go over the financials. We did have a couple of transfers that we'll review later on in the meeting. Nothing overly earth-shattering though.
Thanks for stepping in that night as well.
No worries.
Curriculum, also night?
Tina's on.
Oh, Tina?
For those in the audience, we have a virtual board member. Tina is right here. She's from India, and I think it's about 4 a.m. Tina, is that right?
Yes.
Alive and well.
I forgot the date. I'm sorry. I barely slept in the last 2 weeks. We did have the meeting. I would encourage parents to really watch it. It was really interesting. We talked about visual performing arts K-12. We talked very briefly about the homework policy, which I think parents should read, especially if you're rising high schoolers, because it identifies all or approximate times for, when you have to code H1, H2, and H3, which are regulations which I think parents should understand. And we talked very briefly about the curriculum writing process and an update about
Thank you, Tina. We have policy meeting as well?
Yep, the policy committee met on April 18th. We have 2 policies coming to the full board this evening for revision and 1 new policy.
Great, thank you. Any other committee or liaison reports for today? Sean?
We did have a prevention council meeting, last week. Few things coming up. April 30th is Drug Take Back Day. There'll be a bin at the police department for expired drugs. We're working on a couple things for prom and post-grad event. I know we started the conversation today, but I'll get that run to ground soon. There may be a giveaway to post-grad for things that these kids can use in college that have our messaging on it. And I think right now we're still running some stickers on Planet Pizza boxes for alcohol awareness. So if you pick up a pizza at Planet, take a look for our stickers. And we're also working on some tamper labels for liquor bottles that'll carry our logo. So there's a lot of moving parts on Prevention Council.
Great, thank you. Any other liaison reports for tonight? Okay, moving on, we have the approval of the March 14th minutes. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of March 14th, 2022.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Okay. Any revisions? Any adjustments to be made? I didn't see anything. Okay. There being none, all those in favor of approving the minutes for March 14th, please raise your hands. 8-4, and I'm going to abstain. I was out that night, so the motion carries. Thank you. And moving on to first discussion item, Scotland's Bombers Community Project.
All right, so we have several representatives here from Scotland, and we're going to have one of our representatives on,
It's going to get bright.
So we're good?
Mhm. So you guys can just stand right there, right? You want we'll get you the podium too. If you guys need. And then bring the screen out.
Yang, who's going to be joining us virtually. We have Olivia. Olivia, can you wait for us? Riley. And Lena. And Miss Pat Posen, who will be sharing a project that they're incredibly excited about, and I won't take away their thunder, but what I can certainly say is that this has been a few months, I think, in the making at least, and it's so clear across their school at Scotland how important this project is to them. So I'm thrilled to have students here to communicate and share out what their work is, rather than it being us. Hi, Anna. Let's see, I want to make sure.
Hi, Anna. Can you hear me? You can hear me?
Yep. She can hear us?
Yes. Yep.
All right. So I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Patterson.
So we just wanted to say thank you so much for having us here this evening. Scotland fifth graders have been working on an incredible project. They've been doing multiple activities to support that project. So this evening we have some representatives who just wanted to share with you a little bit about what they've been working on.
Good evening. We want to thank you for letting us speak tonight. Let us introduce ourselves.
Hello, I am Lena Idris.
I'm Riley Jackson.
My name is Olivia Paletta.
We are here tonight representing the Scotland Elementary 5th grade class to inform you of a fundraising project we've been working on for the past few months.
Back in November, Albany Gateway Beaches, Smith Park book A Long Walk to Water. This book includes the fictional story of Naya, a young Sudanese girl who has to walk long distances to gather water. A parallel story shares the true experiences of Salvador, a Sudanese refugee or lost boy during the country's civil war. Salva spent years walking across multiple countries from refugee camp to refugee camp before relocating to Rochester, New York when he was in his 20s. When the war began, Salva was separated from his entire family and didn't know what happened to them. While living in New York as an adult, he finally learned that his father was still alive in Sudan for a very ill and many others, had gotten very sick after drinking contaminated water. When many people living in South Sudan did not have access to clean water, Salah began a non-profit organization, Water for South Sudan, in 2003. He hoped of building wells in his home country to improve the access to safe and clean water for many. As of last year, his organization has built 505 wells in the country.
Water is a necessary resource for every living organism to survive. It should not be a privilege, but a right to have access to clean water. Women and girls walk an average of 3.7 miles every day, and some must make the walk twice a day just to bring back water for drinking, cooking, and cleaning to meet their family's basic needs. Imagine for a moment walking to and from Scotland Elementary School to the Alders Museum on a hot and humid 100+ degree day with thorny grasses poking at your bare feet along the dirt path. When you get to the water source, you are so thirsty and hot that you take a drink of water from that pond, lake, or standing water. Remember, on your return trip, you're now carrying a filled water container that weighs approximately 40 pounds. Of course, the entire time you take this walk, you're aware that the water you've collected and drank may not be safe to drink. Walking to the water source isn't the only struggle for Sudanese women and girls. As Olivia mentioned, the surface water that they do collect is often contaminated from animal waste, parasites, and bacteria growth. When people only have contaminated water to drink, they risk getting ill. Imagine parasitic worms growing inside your body. How would that feel? Intestinal illnesses from contaminated water can cause vomiting, dehydration, and diarrhea, which to us don't seem potentially life-threatening. But because South Sudan is a poor country, many people do not have access to healthcare or medications close by. People who are ill often walk hundreds of miles in search of treatment. This means that those who get sick run the risk of dying from disease or dehydration.
The good news is, many of these awful scenarios can be solved by building a well. Gathering water from a well limits contamination. Water that is filtered through the layers of the earth is much cleaner and safer than the water found on the ground's surface. Building a well in a community also allows girls the opportunity to go to school because they no longer have to spend many hours a day fetching water. In addition, with closer and more reliable access to water, families can irrigate vegetable gardens, providing access to organic foods and helping limit malnutrition. Any extra food can be sold at a market, helping families earn money and be able to afford medicine and other essentials. With the clean water and more income, communities can flourish and expand by building a health clinic, school, and/or sanitation station.
Sorry about that. Sorry.
Perfect transition.
Very sensitive. Won't stop. I think that's what it's supposed to be.
No,
No?
no. One more back.
Getting closer.
Oh, there we go. I only touched it once. All right, come on, roll
Since we began in February, we have made it our mission to educate the Scotland community on why we want to build a well. Student council representatives created 4 informational videos we shared once a week to classrooms and families called Water Wednesdays. Thus far, we have fundraised for the Evening of Art, which raised around $1,800. We also hosted a coin collection competition amongst the classes and raised about $5,500. The most recent fundraiser was in collaboration with our PTA's Mathathon. Half of the proceeds collected were donated to our cause. The Mathathon raised $8,000 for our cause. The STS Student Council decided to do a symbolic event to raise money to donate to Salvador's organization, Water for South Sudan. Now that we've reached our original goal of $15,000, we are hoping to surpass it. It takes $15,000 to build a new well, and any additional monies will go towards the maintenance repairs to wells already constructed, partial wells, a second well, or equipment needed to build the wells.
Saturday, May 14th, we will host a community-wide walk from St. Mary's Church to the Richfield Fountain on Main Street. Participants will need to register in advance, and 100% of the registration fee will go to blood donation. The walk will begin at 8 a.m. and take place along the left route.
We'd like to thank you in advance for letting us share our fundraising work and vision with you. Lastly, Dr. DeSilva, we'd like to ask your permission to share out the information about our upcoming Walk to Water with all of the Richfield Public Schools in hopes they will join us.
I never get to make important decisions. I'm going to say yes to that and maybe to a snow day next year. Of course. And the of course.
Go ahead, I'm ready.
It's a slideshow. Finally, we want to leave you with a final thought from Salvador. With hope, faith, and perseverance, you can accomplish everything.
Does anybody have any questions? Any questions for our students?
Not a question, just a comment. That was fantastic. These kids are boys. They present fantastically. Cause is awesome. We got to do this way more often.
Agreed.
You all did a great job. So much work. And what a worthy cause.
This was completely created by them. The whole presentation, all of their slides, everything was completely by these 4 students.
Ms. Eccleston, maybe you can provide context of how this actually began?
Absolutely. So this actually was a passion project of Mr. DeMarzo's. It's something that he has been really passionate about for years and years. So, and then you guys shared a story. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
We read Linda Sue Park's book, A Long Walk to Water, which talked about 2 people, and one was a fictional story, and one was about a Sudanese refugee or lost boy.
So it kind of started as a passion project of Mr. DeMarzo's, and then it transitioned into a passion project for our 5th grade students. So they took on this cause. They became so excited about it. They presented to me, they presented to their teachers. They had all these great ideas. We partnered with our PTA to figure out how we could do some fundraising, what that would look like. They generated ideas for different fundraisers we could have, and they connected them to water. So the first one was Bottles to Beauty, and we took recycled water bottles and had an art night at Scotland where we raised money to come in and repurpose used water bottles, and they created flowers out of them, which was it was an amazing creative project. And then we did Change for Change, so it was kind of like a penny horse. So students brought in money and we tried to compete. But again, Change for Change, we're trying to make change in the world. So our mathathon, we had our mathathon, and now we're looking at our walk as our final fundraising effort for this to build a wall. Of course you can.
Hello, everyone. I just also, it was my passion project, but my colleagues are the ones who kind of really set it in motion, mostly Amanda Pasquarello. She runs the student council. Everything you see here and all the fundraising ideas all came from the student council. They went from class to class and explained what the Change for Change was. They explained the Bottles of Beauty. They really hyped it up, which you saw on the PowerPoint talking about the Water Wednesday. So it not only got them excited for the fundraiser, but the student council with Mrs. Pasquarello's leadership was able to was also to educate. So I actually went into a kindergarten class because they were a little confused, but just the questions and the passions that they had, and they did figure it out. The student council, the 14 members were able to go to each classroom, answer questions, and really get the kids excited for it, but also to educate them. And when we send out the information, there'll also be QR codes to see all those presentations so that other people can maybe educate their child in Ridgebury and the middle school and all over the community. And that's why we come to you so that we can get that message out. Not only obviously the fundraising, but also the message of, we have clean water and we don't really think about turning that faucet. But these students prepared really hard for this, but it was a lot of students. And again, the leadership of Mrs. Pasquarello was phenomenal. I kind of sat and watched it and was amazed by, at first I wasn't sold that kids could take this on and really move it forward. I knew they could help, but I didn't think they could actually run it themselves almost to some extent. So I just wanted to, it's my passion project, but it's really their work. And Mrs. Osher's been great. Our PTA's been great, and Mrs. Kakoson's been great just supporting us. So that's it. Thank you.
I just want to say I've spent a lot of time in a lot of different African countries, and I've seen this firsthand, what unclean water can do. And I love that you highlighted that not only is it a life or death situation if you're drinking unclean water, but the amount of time that young women spend going to get the water, and having a clean well will enable them to be able to go to school, and it's so important. And so I love this, and I love the difference that you're making. So thank you. Thank you.
Jonathan, can I say something?
Absolutely.
Okay. I just want to say thank you. Thank you to every one of you. And I'm going to be a little emotional, and I'll blame it for the fact I haven't slept in 2 weeks. But I'm currently in a country where water pollution is real. I'm privileged. My mom has a full house filtration system, but I understand how tough it is to even brush your teeth when our water can be polluted. And as Amy talked about, there are so many countries in the world, because of gender biases, it always falls on the women of the family to go walk miles. You know, it's happening in India. As I'm speaking right now, they walk for miles just to get a tub of water, or just water to cook or water to drink. So this is amazing. It really highlights so much as we as a community can do for other countries. You know, we talk about the vision of the graduate, we talk about global citizen. I think this is a great part to highlight that, and how we are doing some steps, or how we're taking steps, and we can help other communities and kids in other parts of the world. So thank you to all of you. I think this is so amazing. Again, I said I'll get a little emotional because I am living it right now. I see this all around me. And it's also highlighting, or helps educate, take away gender biases in countries where this exists. So thank you, and it's amazing to hear this from our elementary schools.
Thank you so much.
So Ms. Jacobson, to our young leaders, you know that we send out a communication every Friday, and we're very fortunate because that communication reaches all of our families in our schools. And so I will coordinate with Ms. Jacobson so that we can be sure that we let our families know on Friday of this great goal that you have, and that time's coming up, May 7th, right? So we need to move quickly. But again, thank you for your leadership, and what it really does show us is that young people, as young as you, can make a difference. In fact, I'd say you and your teachers made more of a difference than a lot of us in our age. So think about that. Just think about what a difference you've made right now, and then how much more time you have to keep going. So congratulations and thank you.
Thank you so much.
We expect to see you all there. Go.
Something we said, actually, you know how to fill it out. Especially if you use a car. We just got
We have juniors open campus.
So we have Eleanor and Eliza here with us. They're actually sophomores, however, had a great interest in, what's wrong here, Dr.? obviously have a great interest in what's going to happen next year as they progress into their junior year, and have a proposal alongside their principal, Doug Greenwood, that they've given a lot of thought to, that they'd like to share with the Board of Education on Open Campus. And so this is a little bit of a two-part. They're here to share their presentation, look for questions, feedback, and hopefully, I imagine that they'll want in 2 weeks from now, just about 2 weeks, for the Board of Education to make a decision on whether or not open campus for juniors is an option. So I'm going to really turn it over to the young ladies that are leading this show. I'm turning it over to Dr. Greenwood in his small chair to open it up, and then off to Eleanor and Eliza.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for hearing us tonight. And I'm here with a couple of my friends, and just to continue with students advocating for themselves and really stepping forward with a completely student-driven initiative that I've seen not make it this far many times. So I'm really proud of them just to start off with the students themselves of bringing this forward. So we're here to talk about the proposition of open campus for our junior class. So these are rising juniors, just to be sure they'd be ready for the fall. And so I have Eliza Forrest is here. She's the president of the class of 2024. Eleanor Luff is the vice president of the class of 2024. And so we've spent a lot of time in communication over the year to come to this point in space to give this presentation. I just want to be sure we start by saying they do have the support of the high school administration at this point. And I'm going to turn it over to the ladies, and they're going to start running us through it, and I'll jump in when it's my turn.
Hello, my name is Eliza Forrest, and I am the elected president of the class of 2024. The current situation for open campus for the seniors was approved in 2012-2013 school year and began in the 2014 school year. The open campus proposal causes a positive incentive for grades and behavior and is yet to be revoked for the masses. It also has gained continued support by families and administration, and management procedures by administration, attendance, security are well established. It also alleviates overcrowding in building common areas, provides more parking, promotes independence, and encourages good decision making. The current situation for the juniors is that they have to stay in the building regardless of the length of time unscheduled, so this could lead up to hours in the building with freeze. Also, many juniors currently have vehicles on campus with licenses that are trusted by the state. And also, juniors currently have early dismissal by parental permission. Juniors have what many to consider to be the hardest year in high school. There's increased demands academically with the addition of many APs and honors classes for students all throughout the grade, initiation of college process, requirements to take standardized exams, and added social pressures. Some include prom, license exams, athletics, and just so many more.
All right, so just jumping in, what's currently in the student parent handbook that was approved in 2014, came before you in 2012, 2013, started in 2014. Obviously, I won't read this to you, but if you just point your attention to the third sentence there, it says RHS does not bear responsibility to supervise students during the periods that they're permitted to leave campus under the open campus policy. So that was, going back over the materials, that was a big point of conversation, and that did go through the board's attorneys at that time. So we still are falling under that now with our current seniors, and we'll just be extending that out to our current junior class. At the bottom, though, it does say the RHS and parents work in partnership, and I think that's really important. You know, we're not falling back on, it's not our responsibility that we work with families in terms of driving habits, decision-making, tardiness, attendance, and so if there's any issues that arise, of course, we work in partnership with parents in terms of back at the school end.
I'm Eleanor Luck, and I'm the vice president of the current sophomore class, and I have been voted into this role for the past 2 years. The rationale for junior open campus, in 2020 to the 2021 school year, the open campus was allowed to all grades to decrease density in the building, and it allowed for safe social distancing during COVID. The most important is that juniors display behavior to have this privilege during the school year. You will see in a little bit the block schedule for the upcoming school year, and this is going to show how well adapted it will be for the privilege of open campus with 80+ minute classes. We want to continue focus on social and emotional health for our students, trying to decrease student stress, and the privilege of open campus would allow for the option of downtime for those who would like. We have ever-increasing time obligations. For example, I have 3 student council meetings a week, I am part of the Unity Club, I'm a 2-sport athlete, and I have 2+ hours of homework each day, and I'm a typical student amongst my peers. And since 2014, open campus has been an important senior privilege, incentivizing proper behavior, healthy decisions, and good grades. The benefits of open campus would include that it expands the student's independence, it would allow for better control of daily schedule and obligations, provide increased access to needed downtime, allow for quiet study in preferred setting, and added incentive to juniors to maintain good academic and behavioral standing at RHS.
Okay, so eligibility, again, I won't read this to you, this is the student handbook, but what we'd like to do is just expand the eligibility requirements we currently have for our senior class. But I think the most important thing to point you to is the first bullet, is that the application completed by students and parents through the Power School Family Portal, the whole process starts with families deciding that this is right for them. And I think that's really important to point out. This is not students telling us that they're leaving campus, this is not us saying kids can leave, this is families saying to us, we approve of this, we are allowing our child to leave campus during the school day. Should the parents check that box, then what you see below is basically a process where academics and behavior are taken into account. And so our deans do that process. They go through the academics and behavioral standing of the students, call anybody in that they might have concerns about. Students who have concerns, they set up plans with those students in terms of how could you gain this privilege, how could you get your grades up, how could you work on your behavior in the building, and they set reasonable timelines with families and students to earn that privilege. So it's been a very important incentive for our seniors that I think with 80-minute classes that we would like to extend up to our junior class. So the procedures are fairly simple. Once the parents approve it, and the deans have gone through it and said, yes, the student is in good academic and behavioral standings, then they work through the attendance office. The sticker is actually placed in the back of the student ID, which says which periods that they'd be eligible to leave during the school day. They show that to one of our security guards in the parking lot. Both A lot and B lot have security guards at the entrances and exits. So they show that sticker on the back, and then they're allowed to leave campus when they come in. They check in through the flagpole entrance. It's the only door that's open. Our attendance office then checks the student in, so we say, yes, you are back on campus. All that information gets logged into Power School, so there's a record to know when the student is on campus.
So the junior open campus expectations so far include that the parent or the school may revoke the privilege at any time, so it's not the student's control, it's either the parent or the school, depending on the circumstances. Students must be free for an entire period, not just a single lunch wave, meaning students will at least have 80 minutes to leave, do whatever they need to do out of the campus, and then return back safely. There's absolutely no transportation of fellow students, which, based on Connecticut driving laws, this holds true for the majority anyways, and students must remain in good academic and behavioral standing to participate. If expectations are not met, or a parent revokes the privilege in writing to attendance office, the sticker will be removed and replaced with one showing no open campus permission.
So 4 areas of concern were raised in 2013 when this proposal came forward. I think they still hold true today in discussions with the community. The 4 major points would be supervision, what are students doing with that time? And so I would offer you that currently our juniors and seniors have what's affectionately called open ends, or late arrival and early dismissal, meaning that parents are already given permission for students to be at home unsupervised. Secondarily, the majority of our families work, and so students are already getting themselves out of bed, getting themselves ready into school. In the afternoons, if you're returning home sometime between 2:30 and 3 o'clock, you're generally in that home unsupervised until your parents get home from work at 5, 6 o'clock, many with other responsibilities, including caring for other children who might be getting off buses, starting dinner, etc. So students generally are given responsibility to be unsupervised by the time they're in high school anyways, and you probably all have Ring cameras anyways. High-risk behaviors is always a question that comes forward. Are students going to be more likely to engage in things like drug and alcohol use if they're allowed to leave campus? And the data that we have would suggest quite the opposite, is that unsupervised time in the building can sometimes lead to poor choices in the building, meaning They'll go places and do things in bathrooms, the library, the student center, which might end up with some further conversations administratively versus students who are learning to better use their time, head home, have something to eat, relax, get their homework done, prepare for the afternoon to come back to class. Traffic, meaning if you're adding drivers, is that going to add traffic to Richfield in general? Our students are spread out across a very large square mileage. So the average right now with our seniors is about 50 students who are able to leave. Not all 50 leave, but about 50. So if we just go ahead and say, okay, there's going to be somewhere between 75 to 100 students that are leaving, had a conversation with Officer Luis to see if he could follow up with some of the folks downtown to see if there was any impact that they've seen with open campus, and he said, I don't know what you're talking about. So our presumption is that it's not going to increase traffic in and out of or around Richfield in general. And of course, is student drivers. That's an absolute concern. As anyone who has drivers at their house, they're not good. Sorry, they're just not. But I think that goes all the way back to one of our first slides, which says we do this in partnership with families. And so it starts with a parent checking a box and saying, yes, my child can leave campus. Families make those decisions. We have seniors whose parents decide it's not a good idea for them to leave campus, or they call at some point and say, send an email and say, please revoke the privilege for a period of time. This is a normal part of, I think, growing up, and it's a family decision. And so, yes, that we are talking about student drivers, but they do have parent permission.
In communication with other schools, we have noticed that Weston and New Canaan High School currently have junior and senior open campus. The Wilton, Darien, and Westport High School do only have senior open campus, but Darien does not have enough parking spaces for juniors to participate. And Wilton and Westport are not opposed to the idea, but no students have brought the proposal forward.
Until tomorrow.
As the president of the class of 2024, I represent my 400 peers as we respectfully request that you see the merits of this proposal and adopt it effective upon the commencement of the 2021 to 2022 school year. Thank you to the RPS Board of Ed for your time listening and taking it seriously. Thank you to Dr. De Silva for your time and meeting with us prior. We know how busy you are, but we're really grateful for meeting with us. And thank you to Dr. Greenwood and Ms. DeJulio for supporting us through this. Any questions?
So as a parent of a sophomore rising junior, I totally support this. I see the downtime firsthand and hear about it on a regular basis. And someone who has a driver's license, and we'll question that performance later. The only question I have, I'm in full support of this, I think it's a great idea. How do the deans feel about it, having that extra layer of administration that they have to deal with in terms of the stickers?
Yeah, so the administrative, that was one of the things I had the folks is go in and talk to the deans, talk to the attendance office and see about the management. Once it's up and running, and it does take a couple of weeks to get the seniors up and running, and so we prioritize seniors first and then move to the juniors. So it could be a month out of the gate to get them going because they take it very seriously.
Yeah.
But everybody's in favor of it because of the reality is they're spending a lot of administrative time right now dealing with, frankly, parents calling kids out during the school day, which we don't allow. And then also calling parents back because they're supposed to come into the school to let a junior out who has a car. And so it's the management will be easier.
Okay.
In the long run.
That's great. You ladies did a fantastic job. Thank you for pulling this together. Well done.
Tina, your hands up.
Okay, yeah. I have a sophomore, and I know you ladies, and I was told to miss this meeting. But just in case I had any concerns, but I think you did an amazing job as a rising sophomore. I completely support this. But my question is more geared towards the other side. I have no concerns. I think the administration will address it. I think the kids, by and large, are responsible. My child, and I'm talking about children who will turn 16 later on in the year and don't get their license far away. So is this privilege even for kids who do not have a license, so parents would have to call in and pick up their kids? How would that work? Or is this privilege only for kids who do have the license? Maybe I missed it. I'm sorry. I just wanted to clarify that.
License and a car.
Yeah, mutually exclusive, meaning that parking on campus is one privilege, Open campus is a separate privilege, meaning you do not need to have a vehicle on campus to access open campus. But generally speaking, it's for our student drivers because they're coming and going during the day. But it could offer some flexibility for a student who doesn't have a car, but here and there they could bring a car to campus if they had a doctor's appointment or something like that. So I think it's going to aid families, but no, you don't have to have a car to access open campus.
Okay, all right. I mean, my kid wouldn't be allowed to drive almost late in junior year, so I'm just thinking I'll have to drive it. But I understand and I respect from where this is coming, and I support it. As Liz said, there's a lot of downtime and the kids can get a lot done. I think Dr. Greenwood, you have talked about the concerns that parents have raised about driving behaviors. So I do appreciate the fact that you do highlight that this is a partnership with parents. In the end, it's the parents who make the decisions, and parents know their kids best. And if they so choose that their child probably is not safe behind the wheel, I think parents should be aware of that and make these decisions in collaboration with RHS. So thank you, ladies. I think it was a great job. As a sophomore mom, I completely support that, and even as a community member, I support that. So thank you.
Just to follow up to that, if I may, just how does a student without a car participate in open campus?
I mean, the only way they would is if they brought a car. And there was, not every student has their own car every day, but if you were accessing open campus, you could get a daily pass if you had a doctor's appointment, and still, then you could leave during the day. Currently, right now, your parents have to come to campus and get you, so it will help families.
Yeah, I also have a really late birthday, so I'll be getting my license like halfway through junior year. But I think it's gonna help me because a lot of times I have to go to like dentist appointments after school or like doctor's appointments, which takes away from like sports, social time, doing my homework. And I just feel like if I had that long amount of free time in the middle of the day, that could be really important for me to go like do just important appointments that I need.
Eleanor and Eliza, when we were together, you talked about a lot of the things that you might do during that time. Could you just elaborate a little bit more on what you might see kids junior year using that open campus time for?
Yeah, I just would want to say that at school, just in my opinion, you can get easily distracted with all the things going on in like the student center, just with so many people there. And I think that you'll be so much more productive with the opportunity to go home, get your homework done, and you'll have so much free time to do other things like sports, and it'll just decrease the stress on the students.
Yeah, Dr. Greenwood laughed out loud at me when I said this, but I suggested that students will go to the library to find like a quiet place to study and to like just check out stuff. And he thought it was hilarious that I said that, but I genuinely think students, if they need to get something done, they'll use their time like to their advantage.
I'm gonna ask your mom next year.
Rachel, and then Tom. Everybody's got questions.
So I just have a couple questions. My kids are still little, so I have a couple of years before driving. They're still like in elementary. So in 12th grade right now, they could leave during the day, but it has to be an 80-minute block. It can't just be like the lunch wave. That's my understanding.
That's fine.
And then you said open ends. So is that, you said juniors and seniors right now currently have
Essentially, if you don't have a class for the first time block or the last time block, you can come for when your first class starts and leave after your last class ends. So you could have first period off, come for second. You could have fourth period off, leave after third, with parent permission if you're a junior or a senior. And so all we're really asking for is the 2 little blocks in the middle. You're already doing the other 2.
You're already doing the open ends.
Yeah.
Here.
With a block schedule, they're already out of the building for, frankly, pretty big chunks of time. We're just adding those 2 in the middle.
And the seniors, do you see them taking advantage of that middle of the day if they have an 80-minute block? Are they leaving?
Yeah, so it's funny. They love being together, especially coming, where we've been. So what I generally see them do is they come to the student center and they eat. They sit with their friends, and then they slowly disperse out to their cars, and many of them go home. Some they just don't want to carry their sports equipment to school. They don't want to rush out in the morning. They'll go downtown and run errands with parents. I gotta run to the pharmacy, pick something up, and I'm gonna go do this. So they're sort of out and about, really just responsibly using the time, and then check back in through the front door. So, but it's not as if the bell rings and you see this mad rush. It's a very slow sort of trickle of kids who head out to their cars and then go off and then come back, usually, 40, 50 minutes later.
And how has the parent feedback been around open campus in the 12th grade?
In terms of 12th graders, we haven't had any negative feedback from parents that I'm aware of in my time either previously there or now. And if anything, most of the feedback I got this year was what happened at open campus, why the juniors now not being allowed to leave campus. Got a lot more emails to the office.
Thank you.
Sure.
Tom? One comment, one question. First of all, you guys presented a great case. I don't know if law school's in the future, but I'm all in for this. Okay. But I have one question. Would this be allowed, junior or senior, who wants to leave, they can call Uber driver comes to campus, picks them up, takes them out, comes back?
Yeah, so we don't allow that unless we have a parent calls and tells us that they can take the student. Because we don't know who the drivers are. For the same reason,
Right.
we don't let DoorDash drop off food for that exact same reason.
But it's not a perfect policing situation, right? Someone could walk out.
Thomas, I think legally the Uber driver shouldn't be picking up anyone under the age of 18, I believe.
Yeah, it's not something we've encountered that I'm aware of, but if we've had certain emergency type situations in my time where a parent will call and say, I can't get there, but I gotta get send a taxi instead of a Danbury hospital. I'm not saying we've never done it, but it's not something that we work within our, frankly, we're generally speaking, our students have vehicles.
Great.
So, when you said you have to have a car, I mean, a child, a student could still have their parents pick them up, right? And have open campus, so they could just, or they could hop on their bike, or, right? I mean, or walk, or, right? So basically, anybody can have open campus privileges. You don't have to have a car, right?
You don't have to have a car, but only seniors now can. Any other reason to leave campus, you have to have parent permission. So, for instance, if we were to say, all right, we're not going to approve open campus for juniors, parents can just call if they want their kid. I'd need 5 more secretaries.
No, I mean, but the juniors, if we pass this, the juniors then could still use their bike or walk out, or, obviously.
They could, but there's, other than a couple of houses that are right, there's really nowhere for the kids to go. And again, we wouldn't let them leave in pairs, we don't let them leave in groups, any of that. Even if 2 kids try to walk off campus, we'd have security guard bring them right back in and find out what's going on.
But their parents could just always be the people to pick them up.
Of course. And we do have some seniors who don't have vehicles that parents come and pick them up, bring them home for lunch, and then bring them back again.
Sometimes I have twins, and they all share the car. Mine 3, so it got a little hairy. So sometimes I have to pick them up, something.
Yeah, the driving laws have changed over the years, and now there's a lot more cars on campus for that reason.
Okay. Just as a side note, my junior and the seniors offered to get Uber when he missed the bus. So I would find out after the fact.
After school is over.
No, to school.
Oh, okay.
To school when he missed the bus.
It would be very convenient if there was a kid's Uber, I can just say that.
Yeah, there was some talk, but we've had it, it's been, and that was, so it just, as an aside.
I do believe that in all earnest, for the safety of the kids.
Oh, absolutely.
They're most comfortable if
Agreed.
they use their cars, their parents pick them up, and not even putting that out as an option.
Great presentation. I just, as a Gen Xer, latchkey kid who got off the bus and at the house in 1st grade, I don't understand how we got here. Yeah, it's nuts, but this is a good progression in the adulting steps, and it continues into college where you have to live with other people and handle personality conflicts and stuff. So both my kids as seniors, first one was in 2015, so she was an early adopter of this, and it was positive for both of them.
Actually, I didn't get to my question. Oh, I had a question. That was just an aside. Yes, it was a fantastic presentation. I can just echo everyone on that. And I just want to make sure that I heard you right. So, the senior class, there's only about 50 that participate in open campus?
Yeah, per period, we pull the data based on mostly how they're checking back in.
Sure.
About 50 per period, and they range from 35 to 50.
Okay.
So it's not this massive.
And so it'll probably be anywhere from a 2/3 to half of that.
I would say
juniors,
your juniors
just because of the age
of
of
licenses.
Exactly right.
Versus your seniors who largely all show up with licenses. Right.
So at my high school when I was a kid, you know, a long time ago, we had this at my school. If you had a license, you had a car, you could leave whenever you had a free period. And I agree, I think it's a great step on, you know, becoming an adult. I had a very late birthday, and so I know back then I could just jump in my friends' cars. And so I wasn't left behind. My only concern is for those kids who have the very late birthdays, that when everyone else gets to leave, those kids who are still too young or who don't have a car, who are sort of forced to stay on campus. I'm just wondering if we can come up with any outside of the box type of ideas for them to have additional freedom or to leave, or if there's a place that they can go that they can walk to, or I don't know, but I just feel badly about those kids getting left behind.
My impression is, and we could dig on this some more, but kids are not feeling left out for a variety of reasons. Namely, they're mostly in class. You know, the 50 kids leaving, I'm talking about 50 kids who were able to leave during that period. So it's not a massive amount of kids. Secondarily, the way that I see them using the student center, as I said, there's not this like rush of kids. Like, it's not the cool thing to do to run out the door. They're truly staying to eat, talk to their friends. Some of them get up and walk out. Some of them stay and study. Some of them go to the LLC. I've not encountered any stigma involved in having a late birthday or not having a vehicle or anything like that. Certainly something we could keep our eye on. If we move in this direction, that would be a great thing for us to keep our eye on over the first year. But I'm not anticipating that as a concern, but certainly we can survey kids through advisory, et cetera, and take a look at that.
I have a question. This might be better for the next presentation, but I was just thinking, in that downtime, do they have access to like the gym or to the track? Can they do that instead of?
Supervision is always an issue in those spaces. So the truth is, for the gyms, largely there's gym classes and never using them. And the track's just too far off campus for us to. We have plenty of outdoor spaces they can use around the building, but yeah, just supervision-wise, we can't allow it.
Do you have another question?
Yes, just to follow up, and just and it's for me and it's early morning. Is this proposal, along with the fact that it's for license and all the guidelines that you presented, almost similar to the open campus we did have when our current sophomores were freshmen because of COVID? So to Susan's point and Amy's point, if your child does have a late fall birthday or if you do not have a car, a parent can still pick you up, correct?
Correct.
You can still leave for the 80-minute block as long as the parent has ticked off the open campus on the power school.
Right. The difference would be right now the parent has to physically park the car, get out of the car, walk into the building, go to the attendant's office, get their junior, walk back out to the car, get in the car, drive off. Student has open campus, the parent could pull into the loop, the kid could run out, hop in, show the ID on the way out. So even if you don't have a vehicle, you know, a student in good standing, this is going to be a convenience to a family. I just would want to say that, you know, one of the things I think is really important, and I know we talked a lot about social, emotional, you know, the health and well-being of our students, is that I feel strongly that the current sophomores could use a win. You know, the seniors are seniors and they're moving on. Our juniors are going to be seniors, which is always a win to be the seniors. You know, the freshmen, our current freshmen, you know, they're going to enjoy likely 3 full years of not wearing masks and having normalcy. You know, this sophomore class now has spent 2 really odd years of high school, I would say. And I think from my standpoint, we put all the pieces together and you think of what you could do in terms of tenure in a building and making kids feel really good and special and cared for moving into next school year. I think this is a huge win. It's a huge win for my friends. It'd be a huge win for the school. So I would ask that we keep that in mind too as we make our decision moving into the next couple of weeks.
Can I quickly add, I've heard this nonstop from my sophomore and the excitement the kids are feeling. And to your point, Dr. Greenwood, this is the year that has been struggling. You know, they transitioned to high school in one of the toughest times, and so I know how much they've gone through. I know they've done incredibly well in such exhausting circumstances. So I do understand where you're coming from, and I know the excitement that the current sophomores are feeling. Even mine, who will not get a license, will probably very much
Anything else? Great presentation, thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you guys so much for your
There is a next part of this process, so we'll be back on May 9th, where the Board of Education will formally move ahead or not move ahead with open campus programs, okay?
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you, see you then.
All right, moving on, we have the RHS interim bell schedule follow-up. First grade.
All right, so this is a big group. Yeah, lots of chairs. Got one of these for you. Even go. There you go.
So I spent a lot of time with Mr. Simoish and Mr. Yeated. I see that we have some new friends with us, and Dr. Lee, of course, some new friends with us as well, to share really a more formal update on RHS schedule. Mr. Yeated, do you want to introduce the team?
I think Dr. Green was going to.
Yeah, I'll just stand just as I need to. I'll take a look at it. I just want to start by saying we're here to give you an update on the RHS bell schedule and then present a schedule that we're hoping to adopt for the 22-23 school year. Obviously, you can make some revisions, but we're feeling pretty good that we're in a position to present something to you that we'll have for a number of years. This has been a multi-year study. It predates my principalship. This is something that's been going on at least 4 years. And so I inherited this. Obviously, with the events of the last couple of years, it kicked it into a pilot phase, I think a little quicker. But I think overall was really good for our student body and teachers to have to live with it for the last couple of years and see it really work the kinks out and allowed us to really have time to also talk about other schools who got kicked to the block schedule too very quickly. So we got a lot of information from other schools. So I have a lot of different constituents here because I think it's important that you hear and understand that it's not just administration or teachers or students, everybody together has been working on this. And so as a principal, one of the best things I always feel like I can do is step back and not talk, which I just talked before, so that's kind of great, because all of these people are here to share their excitement around a schedule that everybody believes in. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Yeager and Mr. Martins. They are the co-chairs of the schedule.
I'm sorry, Mr. Martins. I actually took his nice Portuguese last name and took an alternative nice Portuguese last name. But his real last name is Martins, but I gave him Simões, which is an equally nice Portuguese last name. I don't even know where that came from, by the way.
It's a story, it's great.
But it's Mr. Martins, so I apologize.
All right. Yeah, well, so thank you. It's so nice to see everybody in person. It's been a few years of watching you on screen, so it's nice to be here. So I'm Mike Yeager, I'm one of the assistant principals. I'm in charge of grade 11, and I've been working on the schedule for quite a number of years. We have Mr. Martins here with us as well. We have two of our teachers. We have Ms. Carlin, who's representing the NEAR, as a social studies teacher, and representing teachers as a whole. And we have Mrs. Ruella, who's going to be representing, she's our special education department chairperson, and so can speak so we can speak to all populations of students within the school. And then we're lucky to have two of our juniors with us. So we have Lizzie Garson and Sam Verdejo, who are going to hopefully bring a little bit of the schedule to life. So thank you for entertaining us this evening. I think that the bell schedule is kind of mundane, but as we've learned in the past couple of years, it can really change the climate of the building. And so, initially when we put this presentation together, we were going to represent the student voice through quotes, but we have students here live in person. So we'll leave the quotes in, but we want to hear from our students, and so they'll speak to you about their experiences on different aspects of the schedule. So this first quote is really just about that shift that we made. While it was necessary to make the shift due to COVID, but we shifted from this 8-day rotating drop one schedule where students had 7 different 43-minute period classes in a day, and there was a long block in the middle. And so, yeah, we're just talking about that shift from 43-minute periods to this block schedule.
So I definitely believe that with the block schedule, it's much easier to know what classes you're having the next day. Like with the A through H schedule, it was constantly rotating, so a lot of people had their schedule as their phone backgrounds, and they didn't really know what class they were going to go to the next day, so this block schedule really helps with that. And also I found with typically subjects like history that have maybe less units but more context within a unit, it's much easier to just go over all the information within one long period than splitting it up daily.
So our committee, as mentioned, was very comprehensive. We had people from counseling to admin to SLO and AAR, special education, the A school, and we cannot thank them enough for such a great committee and time. It was, at certain points, it became, pretty discussion heavy, but we really came up with a great plan, and we can't thank them enough, so we want to just make sure that we did that publicly. So here we wanted to communicate the impact that the block scheduling had on the student experience.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Lizzie. With the block schedule, I find that since we only have 4 classes a day instead of 8 or 7, it makes it a lot less on the workload, and it makes it a lot easier for me personally to balance it out and manage my time. Say if I had like sports or activities until like 8 p.m. at night and I don't necessarily want to do homework after that, I'm going to do that homework the night before because I would already have had it from the class before, and I won't have to like rush and get through everything and have to worry about it being due the very next day.
So we wanted to share with you how we got here. So first off, as Dr. Greenwood mentioned, that this was a conversation that's happened years prior to actually being pulled into a block schedule. There has been site visits, there has been research, and it's really a common trend that has been actually happening within not only our own recent schools or close schools, but also nationwide. But we felt as if our schedule was working and we didn't feel the need to move on to that next schedule. So of course, COVID happened and it kind of thrust us into this because it allowed us to really have less contact in the hallways, socially distanced multiple times throughout COVID. So, of course, currently we went in a hybrid year. Even with the hybrid year, we still had the time to do some research. We went and actually did some site visits as well last year to kind of just see, is this a schedule we want to keep? Well, coming into this year, we said, well, we're still here. We're still liking it. However, there's some issues. And so we had a conversation with our committee. What are the things that we liked? What are the things that we don't like? And what do we do and how do we move forward? So what we ended up doing to start was a focus group. And we had a focus group of hundreds of students from all different types of classes to all different levels of classes. And we asked them what they liked, what they didn't like. And we did the same thing with staff. And this kind of led us into these surveys that we ended up creating. And we had over 1,200 students and over about 100 staff respond to these surveys to kind of give us some insights in regards to their experience and what they think about the schedule. And so this kind of has led us into our next steps. At the same time, concurrently, we also were in discussions with multiple area schools. We were able to visit one. Unfortunately, due to Omicron, we couldn't actually physically visit some of them, so we had to stick to conversations. And we learned quite a bit from them. And at the same time, Dr. Greenwood was talking with the PTSA to constantly keep updated in regards to our process. And at this point, we kind of returned to our committee, kind of talked about our findings, what we actually are must-haves that we needed in our schedule, and what was our next steps and our actual schedule. And so we're at the final stage where we're communicating with all our stakeholders, and we wanted to make sure that you're aware of what we came up with.
So this next quote really just talks about students' experience with a longer class period versus the shorter 43-minute periods.
So one of my favorite things about the longer class period is that it gives time for teachers to break up the period instead of just having
a lecture for 45 minutes and then coming back the next day and doing an activity based on what you just learned. You get to do that in the same time frame, so it feels much more fluid with learning. And I think that it gives teachers a lot more time to like have us make sure that we comprehend the topic before we're quizzed on it or like in group presentations about it.
So, over time, in conversation with the committee, through the focus groups, so those focus groups, just to give a little more detail, we visited classrooms, and so we made sure to visit all the various levels. So we went to honors level classes in the humanities and STEM programs, we went into electives, we went into special education courses, we tried to touch on as many of the student population we could in those focus groups face to face, and then the surveys obviously blanketed the entire student population. So looking at that data, talking to the subcommittees that went on site visits, and then in the committee as a whole, obviously there are certain topics that rise to the top as these are things that we believe we must have in our schedule, and these are things that would be nice to have. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about that quickly. So the must-haves that we decided to keep intact, or that we wanted to maintain that block format, and that's over 80% of students and over 85% of students and 80% of staff believe that they wanted to stay in the block schedule for the next school year. We wanted to maintain a static, non-rotating schedule for simplicity's sake. There's something to be said about the pacing, about organizing yourself and preparing for the week when you know that first period's in first period, second period's in second period, and fourth period is the end of the day, right? And knowing that that's going to be consistent every day instead of trying to figure out which class is where and map it out for the week. Something that we're going to talk a little bit more about is something we experimented a little bit with during the pandemic, but the introduction of the flex period to open our day. Some of the nice to haves were, and this is again directly from students and teachers, was that we had an 83-minute block. Feels a little bit long. It's pushing the extent of engagement for students in that amount of time. So if we could reduce it, it would be nice to have. The passing time we had was just an awkward amount of time, and so we have a 9-minute passing time right now. It's not really long enough to decompress, but it's also too long to just pass from class to class, and so students and teachers feel like they lose momentum in that time. And so looking at, from students, reducing passing time between classes. Our lunches feel a little bit rushed, so they wanted to see if we could extend the lunch period for our students. And then in our current model, we have just to make the time allocations of the classes even across the board, we have what we call virtual office hour during that lunchtime, which is students are in class, but it's a downtime from active learning. It's time where teachers can help students one-on-one, small group, but it's also time for students to access other teachers via email, check homework, kind of reconfigure themselves for the day. So that time is a little open-ended, and so looking at eliminating that and instead bringing in a more prescribed model, which is our flex model, which we'll talk about in a moment.
So I want to introduce you to our schedule here. There's not really a lot of significant changes or shift into the schedule. A couple of things to point out. One of them is that flex time to open our day. It allows for student flexibility of instructional choice, and we'll talk more about that shortly. The other is the fact that currently we are in an 83-minute block. We're moving to 80. This will decrease the instructional hours only slightly. Currently with our 83-minute block, we have 124 instructional hours per course, and we're moving to 121 hours per course, again, gaining this flex time, which we'll talk more about.
Yeah, so just some of the other changes, we have always really, since I've been here, since all of the schedules we looked at back in high school history, we've had a 4 lunch wave model due to the size of the school. That 4 lunch wave model forces us to be in a rotation or have that virtual office time. And so we were looking at ways, just how can we make increased lunchtime without forcing a rotation or forcing us to have lots of odd free time during the day. And so we do believe that we're at the size of the school now where we'll be pushing the limits of the cafeteria, but where we can go to a 3 lunch wave model that is 40 minutes long. It just feels humane, right, to have a 40-minute lunch. It's not a long time, but compared to a 25-minute lunch where students are rushing down to get into in line with the cafeteria, get their food, and then they just want to sit and decompress and be with their friends. This will slow that pace a little bit and allow students that time to really engage with one another. So the other reason that we believe that we can fit the school into these 3 lunch waves, obviously increases the size of each wave. Because of COVID, we added a lot of exterior seating, which we plan on keeping. Students love it in nice weather. At points we did expand into the black box theater during the lunch wave, so we added tables into there just to offer extra seating. We've offered single seats around the first floor, and students are just accustomed to kind of spreading out a little bit more during lunch. And with a little bit longer time, it gives students that time instead of rushing down. Again, they can spread out, so we believe we can handle it. And junior open campus would obviously help us there, so a benefit there. Some of the other notes. So we shortened the passing time down to 6 minutes from that 9 minutes. We're not rotating, as you can see, so we still have 2 different days. So we have up there now, we have orange and black days. That's not set in stone. Right now we have A and B days, but we also have periods that are split, so they're one little a, one little b, lowercase b. And so it leads to a lot of confusion. And so that's just to acknowledge that we know that we need to fix the naming scheme of our periods and days to make it a little bit easier to understand. So the next slide, yeah, we're just showing what a student schedule may look like in this model.
So as you see to the right, we see a potential student schedule, and the nice part about this model is that those scheduled lunches are actually clearly in the actual student schedule. It's clear, it's simplistic, and with the current schedule as it is, we also allow for students who have programs after school or midday, such as the Center for the Arts. So it allows for us to accommodate other students and other programs.
Sure, and what's not represented here, just because of the dynamic nature of it, we don't have any special education courses on this schedule, but for planning purposes next year, we're building our special education IS classes or resource classes into the half blocks. So if you can imagine those 2 blank white spots, that would be a space where we could have an IS literacy course or a numeracy course. If a student, again, our freshmen and seniors are taking health classes, so that may be swapped out. If a student has 2 IS classes, they may be in a single period, but they would only be 40 minutes long. And again, that's purposeful. So what we learned this year was that 80-minute block for a full-time IS resource class. It's a long amount of time to receive services. And so we thought it would be better to have smaller touch points on a more regular basis. So a 40-minute block every day feels like it would be services suits better than an 80-minute block every other day. So this is, I think, the big add, right? This is what we're really excited about to discuss. This is what we feel like this schedule allows us. This is what we're gaining. So flex time, the general concept is that this is a dedicated time in the morning for students and teachers to collaborate within the school day. So,
I believe that flex time would be truly beneficial. For example, when you're making up a quiz or a test, let's say my period doesn't line up with my teacher, or I have a lot of homework that night and I know that I have activities that may conflict with it. It's a much nicer time to go in at the start of the day and take that quiz or test. And then also, it's great for club alternative times for meetings. For example, for student government, sometimes we need full attendance, so that start of the day meeting right there would help us not have to be pulled out of class, and would give us a great time to meet at the start of the day and not worry about missing any class content as well.
Yeah, and I personally go to a lot of extra help, especially for math. But I think that if flex time was in the morning and I was able to go to the extra help before I had a test or quiz during the day, it would be a lot more beneficial to me than if the flex time was in the middle of the day and I already had that quiz and I don't get that time that I need. And I wouldn't be able to meet with the teacher and go over last minute questions that I might have.
Yeah, so flex time is not unique to our school. Looking at in our research, we found lots of examples of rebel time and hawk's nest time and warrior time from lots of different schools, right? So it seems to be a growing trend, but we've had the opportunity to talk to the schools and look at their models, and what we're trying to do is improve upon it with this version of putting it in the morning. So again, the start of our school day will be this dedicated time for review, extension, enrichment. It could be for independent work. Our day starts at 7:25, but it's filled with different opportunities for the students during those first 26 minutes.
In past board meetings, I know class sizes have been addressed and students' needs and social emotional. We feel that this could really kind of help tap into those student needs. The block allows clearly for some small group instruction during the actual time as well. However, we have to worry about all the other classes, all the other students at the same time. So the fact that allowing us to target specific students during the small 25-minute block in the morning to really kind of focus on set skills will be greatly appreciated. We can target students who are falling behind. We can clearly make a benchmark of a student falling below a certain grade, that they will be scheduled into a class that falls below a certain grade. We also can address students who are missing classes for maybe it's an attendance issue, or maybe it's medical, right? So it has an extra time that we can pull a student to talk to them. It could also allow for enrichment. We have plenty of students who really do love a subject and we want to talk more about a topic. Well, we can go ahead and schedule that in there, and other students can join as well. And it also will allow us to really kind of get to know students a little bit more, not only just personally, but also with their academic challenges or academic gains as well during this time.
Yeah, so one of the reasons that we're confident moving forward with this model in the morning is that there's an add-on to our student information system called the Adaptive Scheduler. So it's an add-on that we've already purchased. It allows, it's built for this kind of thing. So it is a truly flexible scheduler. So the overall idea is that on a weekly basis, the start of the week will start in advisory for all students. So all students will be in the building, they will meet with their advisory teacher, and they will schedule out what the rest of the week, what that flex time looks like, right? So teachers have the ability to open up sessions on their end. They can either open those up and make a certain number of seats available, and students can sign into them. They can also hand select groups of students and automatically schedule them in, and prioritize those so that there is conflict, that a student's scheduled into 2 different sections, it'll figure itself out. But also the advisory teacher will be there to look at that. So we're able to track attendance to these sessions through the adaptive scheduler, just like you track attendance in classes. We're able to monitor the teacher usage, so how often they're scheduling their sections, how many students they're allowing in, and what the attendance to those sessions are as well. So that's a main reason why we feel comfortable moving forward. We can monitor what's happening, and really, because it's a pilot, we want to make sure that this is as effective and as efficient as possible, and so we can make real-time adjustments as we learn how the time is being used. So we're actually currently piloting the adaptive scheduler now with a few different teachers. So we have, like Mr. McNamara is using it for some of his music pull-out lessons that he does, just to get some students with their hands on it to figure out how it works, and teachers to see what that new looks like. And we've just expanded into the English department for the writing conferences, and we plan to expand it out throughout Q4, just to get more teachers and more students figuring out how to make it work well. So again, like I said, one of the things that sets us apart is obviously the timing. So again, we're purposefully placing that flex time in the morning to avoid the common pitfalls that we were seeing in these other districts. So a lot of the other districts, you'll see some of the later school start time schools have put a flex time at the end of the day. And the purpose of that is that when, for athletics competitions, you have students that are regularly going to be missing the tail end of the day. So that way they're not missing an academic class, they're missing this flex time. To me, that sends an odd message about the value of that flex time. The schools that have flex time in the middle of the day, what we're seeing is that while they have the same motivations of these small group targeted interventions, what ends up happening is that popular teachers or teachers that are well liked, their rooms get flooded with a lot of students that just they need to go somewhere, so they spend their time there, even though they may not need that intervention. Or we see overcrowding study halls in the auditorium and gym of a couple of hundred students, and it's wasted time that's being monitored. So we're purposely trying to move it to the morning, schedule it through the adaptive scheduler, and give the students some privileges so that it is a truly targeted intervention instead of an overcrowded or glorified study hall.
We feel that the ability to have it in the morning also allows students to prepare to better engage during the school day. So students definitely are much more motivated in the beginning of the day, right? So you have a desire to be able to accomplish things right away. Also, the idea of catching a teacher right from the beginning and really kind of targeting that piece is so crucial. The idea of not only to access a teacher for assessments, as our students just mentioned, but also they can also check in with the teacher when they had an assignment the night before and they are still struggling with that assignment, but it's due that day. You can reach and actually touch the teacher right before the assignment is due, so it allows for that. It also allows a student who might have had a bad day the night before to touch base with a counselor or other special related services with them to start their day to alleviate some stress. And of course, we as teachers have the ability to kind of move our rep around right at the beginning of the day, so it allows for if a student needs more extra time, that we can go ahead and with an assessment, we can push it to the front and we can actually accommodate that student right in the beginning plus that 25 minutes.
Yeah, I think so. We've heard from 4 high school students tonight, and so I think we continually hear that they're highly, if not overly scheduled, right? And so, especially in the afternoons. So I think that the morning again allows us to address some of those issues. It allows equal access for all students to see their teachers within the contractual day. And so I want to be transparent. We want to acknowledge that this does introduce the opportunity for us to give students the privilege that if they're in good standing, if they're not scheduled in for an advisory and a teacher hasn't scheduled them into a flex period for that day, they would have that opportunity to miss the occasional flex period and start their day at the start of the first period at 7:55. However, again, through the adaptive scheduler, we can monitor student attendance, and we can have we can have checkpoints that if their usage falls below a certain percentage, their advisory teacher has a conversation with them. If it falls further, counselor, maybe admin or dean has a conversation, and we can always dial back that privilege or revoke the privilege if necessary. And one of the other things that we've talked about is this also allows the opportunity where we have a sporting event, the kids get off the bus at 11 p.m. We have a theater practice that doesn't end until very late. It allows those kids maybe that next morning. It allows a little bit of reprieve for them to get the rest they need to prepare to truly engage in the school day.
So we also want to acknowledge the opportunities that it comes with, right? These universal experiences, right? So first off, right from the beginning, our advisory has constantly been once or twice a month. It's very difficult to get to know a student when you only see them once or twice a month. Well, with this model, we're going to have advisory the first day of every week. That allows us as teachers and any staff member who has an advisory to really get to know a student a lot more, right? So we really could see the changes in behavior, attendance, physical appearance, appropriate support, and therefore allow for appropriate supports that we can provide a student, but also to ensure that those academic needs are met. So we can look at their grades, talk about them, and say, well, you should be in this, make sure you sign up for this flex and everything. And at the end, we can really see which flex they actually signed up for to kind of help them, and we'll be with them all 4 years, so it'll be a neat process to be able to see these students progress.
Yeah, so the flex time does offer universal experiences. So again, we have overly scheduled, highly scheduled students in the afternoon. They may not have access to all the clubs and activities that they want to join. So we are thinking that this flex period, it wouldn't be the sole time that clubs or activities meet, but it could be an additional time. So those students that couldn't access it after school can access some of those clubs and activities during their school day in the morning. We also, it's an initiative of some lofty dreams, but I'm thinking that we can even maybe model, looking at like the bridge program, these experiential courses. It may be a time where teachers can try out either new lessons or mini courses that students can join in, not for credit, but just for an experience. I think there could be something like maybe some weightlifting classes or chemistry and cooking or some stream classes. There can be AP test review, PSAT test prep. Class meetings can occur, student government, that student government is missing, they miss some class time now, so this would be time that they can meet. Those times when we need to have full grade level meetings, this could be that time. So there's a lot of use for this morning time that's built into today.
So ultimately, student agency is a crucial factor in self-regulation and academic success. The best way to build agency is to foster student relationships, to provide feedback, setting short and long-term goals, small group and individual conferences, and allow students to develop their own voice. And we feel as if this truly does do that, and will take them through post-secondary education and throughout life. So we recognize the block meets the needs of most of our students, but not all of our students. And unfortunately, no schedule truly will.
I will say that at times it can be hard for me to maintain full attention for those 80 minutes, but from my personal experiences, I've seen that a lot of my teachers have given me time to do individual work towards the end of the class, so it really allows me to kind of digest all that information and understand it. If I have any questions, I can ask them. And again, it's a very nice way to avoid possibly cutting off a subject at an inconvenient time or not allowing us to finish it. Therefore, longer periods allow us to kind of like finish out that whole subject and really help us feel comfortable with the information.
Teachers have had an overwhelmingly positive response to the block. This is technically our second year doing it, but last year, our first time with kids in full time. That block period really gives us the time to either dig deep on a subject or do a variety of little things. I know specifically I'm a social studies teacher, so I do an activity where kids write an economic analysis using real-time economic data. I now have time in that class where they can look at the data, talk with their group, we can discuss it and debrief in that 80-minute period. In past years, I do it over a week. And there's time lost in the stopping and starting, getting class going for the day, things like that. And now know with this block schedule, kids can read, digest, discuss, and debrief. We have been trying a lot of different tools, but as I said, this is our first real year doing it with full classrooms, so we look forward to continue learning about different ways to keep kids engaged. It is tricky with 80 minutes, and you know, kids come in with different energy levels on different days, but all of the teachers are really excited about this prospect, and we're going into what we're going to call our second year of teaching the block next year, hopefully with some training. And that flex period is really the icing on the cake. So we know that in that time we can see kids, we can meet the small groups, we can check in with a lot of kids that kid needs that extra with their teacher. We can catch them in the morning before they come to their next class.
Thank you. So yeah, you know, we want to acknowledge again, teachers they enjoy the block schedule, but we know that we have work to do as a faculty as well. We know that we are still learning, and so to that end, you know, our mission statement is about cultivating a highly engaging, personalized learning environment, and so we are continually working towards that. And so we continue to focus on student engagement in the block as part of our professional learning next year, and so James, you can talk a little bit about the opportunities we have in mind.
So the great part is, having talked to multiple districts, we've learned quite a lot of the lack or a lot of professional development that other schools have had, and so we have some potential speakers coming into mind. We have potential utilizing our own staff who have had great experience with the staff, with the block, kind of helping lead those. We have the opportunity to partner up with other school districts that also have been using block in a while, so we really have a lot of this potential, and a lot of this has already started to be discussed, and we look forward to kind of learning more about the block.
Yeah, and so while we're presenting to you our 2022-2023 schedule, we don't have any plans of saying this is a permanent schedule. We want to continually reflect on it. We would love to come back at some point in the fall and report back to you especially about flex time. And then we'd also like to come back probably this time next year once we've collected more data and information and talk about any changes or modifications that we can make into the following schedule. So we plan on keeping the committee together. We plan on collecting lots of data, collecting lots of information, and trying to make our schedule as efficient and effective as possible.
Thank you, and we'd be happy to take any questions.
First of all, thanks, great presentation. I know I would have trouble sitting through 80 minutes of just about anything, so it's keeping the kids engaged and stuff, but that is, like the open campus, part of the road to adulting. College schedules look very much like that, so kind of get used to it, I guess. The only open question is, when I miss a class and it's 43 minutes, I miss 43 minutes worth of stuff. When I miss a class and it's 80 minutes, I miss 2 days worth of stuff. How do we compensate for that?
And that's something that we're experiencing now, right? I don't know if you guys want to.
No, I think the flex time, what I normally do when I have kids who are out like that, they come in and they meet with me. And we spend 15, 20 minutes and we sit down and say, hey, and we have access to Google Classroom now, so most times these kids have already seen what we've done. We did the day before in class, and they'll come meet with me if they can't figure it out on their own. And having that flex time in the morning to say like, hey, before we have AP Economics period 2, if I can meet with you and go over what monetary policy is and how the Fed affects the money supply, that's a wonderful 20-minute conversation.
I love the flex time. After seeing the mess that happened in Stanford with their block scheduling debacle that's still ongoing, it looks like I'm glad we had all the stakeholders in to do this. And I think back to my kids' experience, something like VPA with Mr. Mack's class. 43 minutes is about enough time to open your violin case, tune it, and then pack it back up. Yep. So it allows even the specials to go that layer deeper, and I appreciate that.
And the nice part too is with a student being absent, we also have 2 days to catch them up before the next class. Right. So it does allow a little extra time.
That's true.
Tina was next.
Yeah. So I actually have a bunch of questions, but I'm going to start first with the block schedule. Thank you. Sorry, it's early in the morning, so I'm still struggling with some words. I think my experience in high school has been with the block schedule, and I've seen how my student, and heard from his friends, it's worked. Teachers have a longer block, they learn much more. My question was, when you did the surveys, right? When you looked at focus groups, did you find, or did you have any feedback that was different, that offered different feedback from the core courses versus the elective? Like, it was great to have a longer block for the electives, as John said, for music, but was it tough to keep that edge for the sports course, for core courses? That's my block schedule question, then I'll go to the next one.
Sure. Yeah. So surprisingly, there was some difference, especially between the cores and the electives. And shockingly, music we thought was going to be one that would love the block schedule. And they find, so while they like the block schedule for that exact reason, that there's plenty of time for the students to work together and collaborate. Like you said, especially in the morning when it's cold and you have to warm up instruments and you have to warm up yourself, there was it was a short amount of time in the 43-minute schedule. What they are finding is that not seeing the students every day is a hurdle that they're trying to overcome. So they were definitely one that were fans in theory, and then realized that there are some hurdles to overcome, but they're working through it. But if they had the choice, the preference, they would still stick with the block. PE, again, is another elective area where they just feel like they want kids moving every day instead of every other day. And so they would like to see a way to incorporate PE every single day. So it's part of the ongoing conversation that we've had, finding ways to use, because in our block, every block is actually split in half, partially for science labs and partially for the special education courses. So we've been trying to get creative with how can we utilize those mini splits for something like PE or music. But right now we can't find a way to make it all work together to make sure that kids have open pathways to all the courses they want.
And it does vary, of course, by teacher. What we found even with the same course or same discipline is that depending on the courses, the teacher utilizes it very differently. So again, part of that reason for the push for the PD, I think, is that it really will help target what teachers need to help student attention at the same time.
Thank you. So another question for the flex time, and I'm just a little confusing, so I hope you can help me figure this out. I think a big pro, I think I said it at the RHS debate too, I said it at the Board of Ed meeting, I think the idea of flex time is amazing, it's great, I think it really is great that RHS is thinking, doing things differently. tomorrow and go to this time?
So the day starts at 7:25, right? So for advisor days, teachers take attendance for advisory. So that would be the start of the week, every single week. Whether that's a Monday, or if we have the Monday off, it would be Tuesday, we would start advisory to plan out the rest of the week. Then from advisory, students would be scheduled into, so they can either opt into, or teachers would be scheduling them into courses. However, if, again, the student is in good standing, they're not required to be anywhere, let's say on a Thursday, they're not choosing to sign up for a club or activity, and they have a free period for flex period that day, their day would begin at 7:55 at the start of period 1 when their first scheduled class starts. So it would be analogous to the open ends that Dr. Green would talk about in the open campus presentation.
Thank you. And you've already answered you've already addressed this about attendance, and you've already talked about the teacher. So I'm just going to quickly address this because I know there are many parents who will be talking about it. RHS is thinking about this differently. We are addressing social emotional health, learning, how we teach children so much differently, and we're talking about adding this in the beginning. Have you thought, or has RHS looked about the debate that has been going on in our community about the healthy start times for our adolescents? Is that something that the committee is looking into? Is it something that teachers feel, the students have talked about? I just think it's because we're doing such stuff, and I know parents are there who are asking these questions. I just wanted to ask that question.
Do you want me to take them?
That would be fantastic.
Hi, Tina. So I don't necessarily see the connection intentionally around the schedule and the flex time with healthy start times. Does it by default allow for some students, as I think the committee described, to be able to provide themselves an extra opportunity in the morning if, again, they're in good standing, they're not scheduled to be in a small group, they don't have advisory, which is required? Certainly, that's an option for them. But I wouldn't want to draw the direct relationship between this presentation in healthy start times. I think that's a bigger, broader conversation that wouldn't necessarily be appropriate right now. So I think that's basically it on that one.
I have another question, but I can wait if anybody else has.
Why don't you go ahead? Everybody does, but.
Mine actually has to do with hers.
Okay, you want to come in?
So, is that okay?
Sure.
So I think where Tina might be drawing the connection though is because you're mentioning social emotional health, and that has so much to do, right? And I don't mean to tell you what you're thinking, Tina, but I think that's where you were drawing the connection. And my question was with that also, because so many children aren't that awake at 7:25, and so if you have an advisor who's insistent on a child being there when that child might be so much healthier at 7:55, would that advisor maybe be open to that because they know that child and allow them the sleep time, because that's sometimes way more important than that little extra time. So I think she's drawing that connection because it is very important, and we need to be discussing this a lot more.
You can start.
No, I was going to say, I think, if there are that level of concern, we would hope that the advisor seeks, a conversation with the counselor, the administrator. There wouldn't be a blanket, we can excuse you from this. And honestly, I, as a scheduling committee, we're not entertaining healthy school start times. I feel like that's a conversation for the Board of Education. And if you guys decided that we need to shift that time, then we would adjust our schedule. But wasn't in the purview of our committee.
And I think the important piece of what the team has described when we have that graphic or the chart up about what that time is being used for those kids, and it goes back to something, Sean, you brought up in the fall with I think you call them your level 3s, your 4s, your high-end kids. It's not just about kids that are struggling, but it's also about giving kids opportunity to extend their learning where they might not necessarily have it in the general 80-minute class. But this time is devoted in some ways, just thinking back to that social emotional piece, for kids to catch up, right? Because if they're falling behind, or that homework was hard, and they're starting their day all stressed out. We talked as a group about the opportunities to just meet with your counselor or your school psychologist to start your day, to make sure that you have everything you need so that you can walk into the day feeling a little bit more prepared or not so stressed out. Certainly students in good standing that don't necessarily require that time will have the benefit to not necessarily arriving at that exact moment. But again, that's not every single day. And what we don't want to get mixed up here is kids have 26 minutes of a later school start time, because that wasn't the goal of the committee. I'll speak for you.
Correct.
It wasn't the goal for the committee. And I know how valuable that time is in the morning and that what your intention was. And I don't want to lose that with the other conversation because I think they're different. So naturally, I think it is something that unintentionally is there, Selena, is that some kids who are doing academically well may not arrive on every single day at that start time because their teachers aren't scheduling them in. But like the committee also said, they're looking at patterns, right? So if a kid is never arriving or not coming when they're scheduled, how are they using that time? And on the road to independence, and I think that's the theme that we've heard tonight, really, with this committee and the committee before, is that there is a road to independence with young adults. And I think this is just another step in them using their executive functioning skills to say, I need to come to school to get extra help in math, or I need to come to school because I need to meet with my counselor because of A, B, or C, or I have nothing on my extracurricular resume because I haven't gone to one single club because I'm going to football every single day, or whatever the case may be. And so that's what the goals of that time is, and I know that we don't want to lose that stickiness or that intentionality. So
can I just add, dovetail to that? So speaking of social emotional health, something that Danny said at the end I think is really important and connects to the conversation we had when we presented on mental health a few meetings ago, which is the power of adults spending time in close proximity with kids and watching for patterns of changes in their behavior. So you both asked me the question, like, well, how do you pick up on that change in presentation? It's that way, that there is somebody who I meet with every week who maybe doesn't have me in class, but is looking at me from a different perspective, and it's just one more adult who's watching me and coaching me if need be, but also like an extra set of eyes on me who understands who I am and what my normalcy looks like. And I think as we balance how do we optimize this time from a social emotional standpoint, I think there's a catch as catch can with the, like, it happens and you get to sleep in for another 26 minutes on that day, but the power of that advisory on a week-to-week basis is exponential. It does deputize everybody in the school to take ownership. It really does. And everyone in the building takes a level of ownership for a very small group of kids. What's the size of the advisory? 12 kids?
12, 13, yeah.
The other piece also that we have to remember is that not every student is going to be able to take advantage of that 20 some odd minutes anyway because they need school bus transportation. So if they don't have a car or a ride to school, they're going to have to arrive, even if they're not scheduled into one of those times. Right, Uber, I'm not going to say that. Uber, they're going to have to arrive at that time because they're not going to have transportation otherwise. So that's an important piece to remember. Some kids, of course, will have that advantage. And other kids, by the way, whether they're scheduled or not, may just want to come to school. Like they're up and they're ready to go, and they may just want to come to school. And so in another really important point, not just in advisory, we talked about it a lot today, my colleagues and I, and we talked about it when I met with the team here, is maximizing the adult interaction with kids. Because the more we can do that, the better kids are in life and in school. And the research is very clear. Touch points with adults makes a difference. So when we're hearing about kids in crisis, they're less likely to be in crisis if someone is checking in. And what a better way to check in when I have 6 or 7 kids versus 24. And those 6 or 7 may be repeated or may be different.
Actually, can I just make a point? Just one last thing that, one of the things that we consistently said through the process is how can we make this more humane for our kids? And I heard, Mr. Yates say that, and this came from the focus groups repeatedly with kids. Imagine your school bus drops you off at 7:15, at 7:25, you're on the 3rd floor, pencil down, AP, calculus, AB test, like let's go. you know, most of us, you know, in the work world, right, you schedule your time just to come into your office to buy yourself some time to get yourself up and moving in the day. We don't afford that to our kids. You know, we talk about preparing them for the work world. We've all done that too. Like you're on two wheels going into the parking lot and you're going into a meeting. You know that feeling? Like we have lots and lots and hundreds of kids who are starting their day, you know, on that hamster wheel, like, first off. So this idea of a flex period in the morning, you know, and talking to the students was, you know, if I could get off the bus at 7:15, at 7:25, be in my calculus class to talk to my teacher for 20 minutes, prepare for the day, and then get into my day. I mean, just that right there could dramatically change the social emotional well-being of our students. Just having 20 minutes to, yes, you're there, yes, you're in school, but you're connecting with an adult, you're talking about your day, you're organizing yourself, you're looking at your calendar, all things that we actually do in the adult world, generally before we get cranky with our meetings. So I just want to make sure I bring that, because it is something that came from the kids, and I do think it's an important point.
Yeah, thank you. So a couple of things. I have a couple of, one's a question, but the first one is, I fully support this. One of the things I didn't hear, but I hope, I know that you guys are thinking about, is the consistency for these kids who have had a very inconsistent experience for the last few years. And I'm so glad that we're not trying to switch back from the block schedule. And as the parent of a high schooler who does not like, he's probably in that 15% for a lot of reasons, but it is so much better that they have consistency year over year with these tweaks than going all the way back to a rapid rotating schedule. So I appreciate that that came up, and I don't want that to get lost, because I think it's really critical for these kids to have some expectation, consistency for their school experience from here. So thank you for doing that. And I think the flex idea in the morning is brilliant. You know, regardless of what time you start school, you tend to have meetings beforehand and things like that. And this gives that allowance of, it's only 26 minutes, but to your point, you can have a little team meeting or a club meeting or something that you would never even have been able to have time. And I love what you guys just talked about making sure that there's consistent representation with the parents or the adults in the room, because it is hard. The counseling team has a large body of students they're trying to deal with. That consistency is where those middle kids that aren't extreme on one way or the other they get lost without it. So I really appreciate that as well. So I think kudos to all of the people on the planning committee for this and the scheduling committee, because you've done a great job trying to balance all that feedback from other places. The one thing I would ask is, do you have metrics, which of course I always ask about, so I really appreciate that. What you don't have in those metrics is baseline information of what's happening now, and then targets on, you know, we've talked a lot about the flex time. Well, some kids will do it and some kids won't. Sometimes it'll be club and sometimes it'll be academic. It would be great to have some targets on, should it be 50% academic? Should it be 100% club? What should and maybe it's different by student and by age, or some kind of stratification of what are we going for? What does good look like for flex, or either by grade point average or whatever. I think that would be a really powerful tool to start to, what were we going after, and did we get it, and did it work?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, and you know, we plan on, you know, our committee's still meeting, and we plan on sort of peeling off this action and really focusing on what are those expectations for flex time.
Perfect.
One, you know, to inform teachers, so in planning for next year, they can prepare, you know, what am I getting myself into, but also students know what the expectations
and
are.
parents too,
yep.
so that they don't get the, well, I'm tired today and I'm not going to
Yeah.
go. Please.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's an important part of the scheduling piece, is if the student is scheduled, they're expected to go.
Yeah.
So that it's not just a free-for-all of, I wake up in the morning a little bit tired. If they're scheduled, they're expected to go because there's a reason that they need to be there.
And a parent can see that on their power school as well.
Right.
Great. So
Right. It physically shows up as the first block of the day.
Awesome.
Power school, we take attendance in there. You can see it on your end as parents. Teachers are seeing it. Kids are seeing it on their phones in the app. I mean, it is a first scheduled meeting of the day.
Does that mean it's gonna throw all those phone calls when somebody doesn't show up, just like any other class? Cause that.
Yeah.
So
Okay. I
the,
don't know if it's good or not.
it's good. It's good. So I didn't like the old schedule. My kids won't do that. I love the block schedule. But at least in the other schedule, you did have a free. And that was nice occasionally because, you know, kids would get tired. They would play sports. They would have clubs. and that sort of thing. They were, volunteers. And so they had that time when they were exhausted. They're up until 1 o'clock in the morning studying or something. Now you're telling me they're not gonna have that.
Well, it's actually not true, because you have now, because it's still the same amount of periods that we had previously, so they might still have a free, but it's an 80-minute free.
But you're not gonna get it in the morning. You're telling me you're not.
The only reason why we had it.
Oh, you're saying in rotation?
So you're saying you're never, so teenagers are never gonna be allowed to sleep in now.
Hold on, so let's just make sure that we're not talking about two different
Right,
things. This
but
is about
the
scheduling.
schedule.
Right, so normally if you had it free, then it would
So
occur on the first period.
the flex time's always gonna be in the morning, and you're
Correct.
always going to have to attend. So you're not gonna have that free.
Unless you have the ability, again, if you're in good standing, that's
I just wanna make sure. Love the block schedule, love the flex time, just not sure. Teenagers, they need the rest.
Amy, and then
Yep. So, just wanted to say, when I was in high school, I had block scheduling, I had advisors, I had Sarah Rice all 4 years, and she was so instrumental in my life, in my academic career. And so, I love that you're going to be meeting with an advisor once a week, and really having that one adult in your life for 4 years who knows you outside of classes, and I think that's such an important thing. And then I just want to say that I really appreciate this collaboration. I love that you're listening to feedback. I know when we were there for the debate in the fall, one of the issues that came up was the passing time in between classes, and just from being there, the sense was that it was too long. And so I love that you're listening to the feedback, you're cutting it back. So just wanted to say thank you for the collaboration, and I really love what you guys have done.
Yeah, mine's more of a comment. Flex time, I mean, I love the idea of it, but it's not real thrilled with the name. Could we call it Tiger Time?
We could.
That has to be discussed.
That would be great.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Fantastic comment.
Just one point that Sean, you brought up about yourself as a learner, or Liz, I think you spoke about perhaps your child. The committee knows where I stand in terms of my learning style. But I think the real important piece that we have to remember is that teachers are still working through their own professional learning around the structure, right? So is it going to be 80 minutes of a lecture? Of course not, right? Is there a time where they're going to have a big chunk of a lecture and then some active engagement and then opportunities for independent practice? Yes. Because just as the girls mentioned, or I think one of them at least mentioned, that it's hard for them to think about 80 minutes. So that professional learning for our teachers is a really important piece walking into next year, so that we can think about what does the anatomy of that 80 minutes look like. Because I think for the most part, no one can be lectured for 80 minutes times however many periods, right? That's just not reasonable, and I don't think kids learn best that way, nor do adults. So that is an opportunity for them next year, and hopefully into the summer, to study what does that best practice look like in math versus humanities versus science.
Let's not ignore the really important elephant in the room, which is it's really hard to eat lunch in 23 minutes. So thank you for expanding that a little bit. I know that was always a challenge. Always.
Yeah, it really makes kids sick. I'm so glad that you looked at that. It's so much better.
anyone else?
Tina, or
Tina, back to Tina.
Of course, and it's only 6:30 in the morning, so I'm wide awake now. To Amy's point, we heard about block scheduling, we talked about flex times. I think that I totally echo sentiment saying that I know this is a collaborative effort, and I'm glad that the students are part of these talks, so I do applaud that.
So we had a, go ahead. Did you want to go right to the special ed question?
Sure. So we want all of our students to have access to everything that the flex time can provide. So we will not be taking flex time to schedule our special education students or the special education services or related services. Obviously, if they need to come and talk with us, we're always available, but we won't use that time for IEP graded services. Our hope is, we want our students to be really a part of the IEP and PPT process. So hopefully during that time we can meet with students on our caseload and really walk them through and get some of their feedback on what they want to work on. So use the time more for that rather than specific scheduled service time.
Might even be an opportunity where students who have similar needs might meet together as a small group and just discuss support services or what they could do to better support themselves or find out resources about them. And then Tina, your first question, could you repeat the first question because I completely lost track?
That's okay. I think we talked about it the last Board of Ed meeting, seems eons ago, and I know Dr. Lissanaway talks so amazingly about how to social emotional health. So my question was, this flex time is great for kids who may be struggling academically or they get the support. It's great for kids who are needing this club, but we also know there are high achievers. There are so many high achievers who do not show obvious signs. And from my understanding, and again, I will use the fact that it is very early and I've barely slept, that I may have missed this in misunderstanding. There are high achievers who are probably not going to show obvious signs and maybe in good standing, so they do not need to be in school until 7:51. Is there a way, or is this committee talked about how that will be something that will be, I don't know, addressing, keeping an eye on how these kids will be identified in some ways, because I do go back to the kids who may be missed, who may not be showing obvious signs of anything for that matter until it's too late.
Yeah, Tina, our experience last year with having kids roll in the morning, that was in response obviously to the, what was going on in the world, but that the students who were most often availing themselves of that time were high achievers. In fact, even though they may not necessarily, quote unquote, need to be there, they're the ones who, generally speaking, have the largest amount of work to do, have the greatest need or desire to access their classroom teachers. And so I actually think providing this in the schedule, we're going to see our high achievers in the building. They're the ones who may be asking to see the teachers versus some other students who may be asking to see them. And I could let the lady speak to this, but my impression is that they're actually our high achievers are pretty excited about the idea of having unbridled access to their teachers every day versus. So, anything you wanted to add in terms of that?
I just wanted to add, even those 25 minutes, sometimes the teacher can say something and it can give you sort of an epiphany, oh, that's what this means, and that way I won't have to spend an hour more time trying to figure out that one thing that my teacher said in class. And that can even help with those who are concerned with the sleep factor. I can go to sleep earlier because I had those 25 minutes in the morning to spend time with my teacher.
Can I try to clarify for myself what flex time is?
Sure.
It's not everybody has a free period for half an hour in the morning.
Correct.
It's not everybody has a study hall. And it is, most people will be in the building at 7:25 most days. The one thing I'm concerned about, and I don't want to get to the point where you're saying this student here, you're doing great in school, you earned yourself an extra half hour of sleep. And you're struggling, you're really struggling, you need sleep, you gotta get in the building. I don't want flex time to be about changing when school starts. That is something different, and it's something that the board can talk about, but it's not part of what is going on with this use of flex time. It's really about that you're not coming in and going straight in full steam into AD Cal. You're going in and kind of setting yourself up for the day or kind of filling in gaps.
And it could be a time for, again, if we have students that have been really inspired by a certain topic, you can go in and explore that together as a small group, right? If a student is trying to explore a career, great opportunity to allow other students to come in and actually look at the career together, right? So there's so many options that we can take this with. It's not going to be just academically. It's going to be a whole bunch of social emotional, curiosity, exploration. So the options are limitless, which is really neat.
Well, and I think the data management side is so critical, especially in the first year, to know in real time who's in the building. So advisors can see if there's like a pattern over the last 2 weeks where a student has only come into flex time during the advisory period. And that's a red flag, because then it's not being optimized, and then there's a whole deep dive into why. And I think, Tina, your question around high achieving students and their emotionality, I think this only draws more attention to that, frankly. Because what it does is it just gives teachers more touch points with kids to identify if they're showing some, risk factor behaviors or responses in terms of putting too much pressure on themselves, or seeming like they're, experiencing an exorbitant amount of, or not even exorbitant, a high level of stress or anxiety, because in a lot of situations, at the end of the period, kids are gone. And in this case, you're not seeing them for 2 days. So teachers don't really have that moment to look at kids to understand, outside of the class happening, outside of the content happening, how are they doing? It's not a perfect 1-for-1. Like, you have the flex period, so you're going to identify all kids for all things. We still need information from parents, but it just gives more opportunities for teachers to look at kids as individuals.
The data management side also provides an opportunity for the administrative team to see how many kids have been scheduled into something. So for example, the first 2 weeks of school, everybody's coming in and is scheduled every single day into something, so that the kids are getting accustomed to the platform, the educators are getting accustomed to the platform, and we're ensuring that kids understand the benefit that they have by owning some of the time for their own needs and not necessarily what we believe is their need. That said, they have the ability to say, okay, we've only had 95% of the kids on campus on Monday, and so we'd like to have 100% of the kids on campus on Monday at that time, or 80%, or whatever makes sense. Or I'm not seeing that Michael has come anytime outside of his flex period, A, because he didn't schedule himself, and or B, that the teacher didn't schedule them. And then also allowing educators to track, when are they scheduling students for flex period? Is this a kid that I haven't seen at all over the course of the month for mathematics, let's say, or for science? Well, that's something that I want to be sure that I'm touching that student at some point, right? So it may not always be math, it may not always be science, it may not always be ELA, but across a child's experience in a given month, they should have touch points across different content areas, electives, clubs, etc. So that data tracking piece of all of them, I think, is going to be the most critical in helping the board, and more importantly, helping the administration and the faculty understand how best to use that time in whatever way we name it, right? How are we best maximizing the time? Because what it's not, and we talked about this a lot, is 26 minutes less in a school day. That's not what it is.
And that from this point, yes, I think as a board it will really help us, and for the community also, when we do get this data, because that's where people understand how this worked, effectiveness, and I'm glad that the group who has done all this work is going to do that and bring it to us. So again, thank you for all the hard work. I truly applaud it. I think we're doing great steps, and we're trying to move our kids, and we're talking about our kids in a holistic thing. So thank you for all that work.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments, please?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, we have the financial report ending March
Please be muted and volume down.
Tina, we're just gonna mute you for a minute, and we're gonna put volume down.
It's not a touch screen.
Hello?
There we go.
No.
All right, does that sound all right?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Thank you for having me. I will be respectful of time. Attached is the March 31st, 2022 financial report. The district has expended and obligated $100,636,000 of $102,260,000 adopted budget. This represents approximately 98.4% of all appropriations. Looking at the financial status of the different categories, certified and non-certified salaries make up nearly 60% of your operating budget, and this is on track. So we don't expect any significant variations, deviations in this particular area. There are three areas that we're going to focus on tonight: medical benefits, special education outplacements, and excess costs. All of which we are going to be spending a lot of time in the next few weeks really diving into and coming up with realistic year-end projections. So this is the end of the third quarter. This report is, so on your next report and for the rest of this year, you will have year-end projections in all categories. We'll be sharing that with the Finance Committee in the next week or two. FICA Medicare, there have been 20 pay periods. Expenditures are projected within budget. I mentioned special education. Special education relies heavily on the state's excess cost reimbursement. We've talked about this in the past. The district's budgeted $1.4 million. Our first filing for reimbursement was in December, and special this year is up on a per student basis to $97,000 from $92,000. What does this mean? This means that we get less money back from the state because we have to meet our average student cost first, and then we get a percentage of funds above that for out students. How does this impact the school? We budgeted $1.4 million, or the district was budgeted $1.4 million. The February payment for ECR did come in. It was $762,000. We don't anticipate the second part of this payment to be at this level. Typically it's about an 80-20 split, but there are adjustments that are made throughout the year. So we're anticipating at this point that will be between $950,000 and $1.1 million. So there is a variance there. Transportation's on budget. Energy has run a little high recently. Oil and gas specifically, from what was budgeted to what we've actually utilized. We've actually exceeded our budget by about 104 based on the encumbrance. What does that mean? It means we haven't actually spent that yet. We've spent 632 as of today, but there's 181,000 remaining that is encumbered for the remainder of the year for oil and gas. As we get closer to the end of the year, we might be able to free up some of that encumbrance, but it seems pretty on point. In summary, and that's really where we want to be today, is $102,260,000 adopted budget. The year-to-date expenditures have been $70,272,000 through the end of the third quarter. We have allocated encumbrances of another $30,363,000, leaving 1.6 remaining unencumbered. And so over the next few weeks, as I mentioned prior, we're going to really dive into line item detail and come up with some really accurate year-end projections, so we can best utilize the funds that are available and let the board know and the administration understand, what adjustments we may or may not need to make as we get into the end of the year. This is very typical, and it is not cause for concern. I will stop there on monthly financial report. There is a financial statement attached to the board packet that shows the details of these numbers. I want to follow up with that with the monthly transfers. This month we've had a couple larger transfers. Plant operations. We've moved some money from some facilities to the high school to cover an emergency indoor air quality test for a special education request. We've also moved some funds from sub-teachers and conference training to, because teachers are unable to attend CEs outside of the district. Instead, money will be used to support ongoing curriculum writing projects. There has been some reallocation of cleaning supplies between buildings. And finally, psychologists that went on maternity leave, we filled with an outside contractor. So we moved 37,575 between line items to cover that. And that includes the monthly adjustments and transfers. So I will pause for a second and await questions. I know we're having a couple little sound issues, so I can't hear real well, so I'll do my best to understand what you're trying to ask.
Okay, any questions first on the financial report for the month, anyone? No, okay, that motion is on the table. All those in favor of approving the financial report ending March 31st, 2022, please raise your hands.
Unfortunately, I can't hear you from my perspective.
Can you see?
But I got the thumbs up from Susie.
Yep.
Can you hear me, Dave?
I can now.
Okay. So.
It's like you're a robot and you did something behind you.
All right. So I'm seeing a couple thumbs up. That's a good thing. Thank you for bearing with me and the technology. And I know that the meeting has run long, so I don't want to keep you any longer if necessary. Next month we'll have a much more robust projection that we can really dive into. Thank you again for your time.
Just hold off, because we have one more motion still. So motion carried, Tina, that was unanimous on the financial report, not on the transfers. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve the transfers presented to the board on April 25th, 2022.
Thank you. Do I have a second? John? Yes. Any questions or comments on the transfers? All those in favor of approving transfers as presented? Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you very much.
I'm gonna close you out now. Bye.
Okay, next up is the 2022-23 Board of Operating Budget. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education adopt the revised 2022-23 Board of Education operating budget presented April 25th, 2022, totaling $106,595,915, or an increase of 4.24% per year.
So in your packet, you have a summary that is not much different than what I presented to you just before break. The difference here is we actually just added the line items so that you could see them in your budget book. Rather than printing you a new budget book, I'm just asking that you add this addendum if you approve the budget tonight. Again, I don't think there's anything that, there was no feedback in terms of concern with any of the adjustments made. As a result of the shift in the budget to the 4.24, you did hear me say that at that meeting before break that every opportunity we can to maximize grant money to focus in on our students, we intend on doing. As Dave mentioned today, I think we'll have a better idea of what our numbers will look like in the last quarter soon, which will give us insights on what we can perhaps purchase so that our students can have that extra money in bridge.
Any other questions or comments from?
Looks like roughly half of this comes out of Wes's hide. Wes, are you good? We're good?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll make sure. Oh, no, yes.
It wasn't like a firm yes.
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 Notice I looked at Susie first. And I said, yes.
We did the pause.
Anybody else?
As I said, it's not ideal, and it's certainly not ideal for Wes's department, so I'm hopeful that, we'll be able to purchase what we need when we need it, but it just may require some waiting.
Not ideal, but the best we can do with funding $500,000 of reductions. Okay, motion is on the table. Do I have a second? Selena, all those in favor of approving the Board of Ed operating budget, please raise your hands. Unanimous. Thank you all. And next up is teacher non-renewals. Do you have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve notification to Morgan Berry, Kelsey DeLeo, Nicole Doyle, Kelly Fontaine, Lauren Maria, Lauren Roche, Melissa Miller, Samantha Chagall, and Anita Valley of non-renewal of their contracts at the close of the 2021-22 school year, and that the superintendent of schools is directed to advise such persons in writing of this action.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Okay. All those in favor of approving the motion? 8-4. Any opposed? Any abstained? Okay, motion carries. Thank you all. Next up, we have approval of a signatory for a CSD Child Nutrition Act. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve Jill Brown, Director of Finance, as an authorized signer for Ridgeville Public Schools for submitting claims for reimbursement under the agreement with the Connecticut State Department of Education Child Nutrition Program, entering with Lauren Martin as an authorized signer.
Thank you. Second. Okay. Any discussion, comment, questions? All those in favor? Unanimous, motion carries. Thank you. And next up, healthy food certification.
I move that the Board of Education accept the Healthy Food Certification Statement for July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023, stating that the Ridgeville Public Schools will not comply with Connecticut nutrition standards.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Okay. Any questions on this one? Comments? There being none, all those in favor? Unanimous, motion carries. Thank you. And on to the first read of policies.
So in front of you this evening, first is policy 5125.1, student privacy, PPRA. It is in front of us this evening for a first read to simply update the language in section 4 to match the language adopted by the board on 4.4 and subsection 7 of policy 5141.3, health assessments and oral health assessments. Any questions?
I have questions. Yeah, so when I look at these, I look at the whole thing, not just the changes, because I think it's our duty to look at the whole policy, as you guys know. I have some concerns with the language on the surveys. They're inconsistent, and I'm not sure why we wouldn't have the same standards for survey notification under those sponsored by the US DOE versus not. I have read the PPRA. This has nothing to do with that. This has to do with Ridgefield's application. Specifically, the language talks about in 2A2, student surveys, that we have prior written consent of the parent or student prior to submitting a survey. But then if you go into surveys funded by other sources, third parties who are not identified as to why they're being data is being collected or anything else, upon request and prior to distributing, not written, it just says shall give notice. It's much softer language. And that to me says that why would a third party have different rights than the U.S. Department of Education surveys? Why wouldn't they be exactly the same? Under what realm would a third party need that kind of confidential information about parents? Let's see, parents' political affiliations, mental or psychological, sex behaviors and attitudes, illegal, self-discriminating, antisocial. I mean, these are really confidential topics, and I find it fascinating that we are more willing to give a third party, any third party, undefined here, information without the same standards that we would have for the U.S. Department of Ed.
So that paragraph in 2A2, you'd like to see copied down?
2A2 and B1B. A and B. If those language would just be the same, then it would be non-problematic.
You'd want that 2A2 in both locations?
Yeah. That prior written consent language.
And 2A also.
Yeah, I think there's multiple, it's about the request and it's very clear that it's written in the U.S. Department of Ed one, and then it's upon request and prior to distributing, very soft.
So that 2A2 paragraph copied to each of the other locations?
Yes, that would be my recommendation for the edit.
Liz, I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses because it's
Yeah.
kind of funny. Might as well get my frame.
Oh.
Sure.
And
students leave and I'm can you just say that one more time?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to write it down on the side.
So in student services, 2A, 1 and 2 is the first set of language, and then in section B, 1A and B. Those two languages, if they were consistent to the first one, would be great.
With prior written consent.
Yep.
No problem. We could do that and bring it back for a second read.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Sure. Anything else on this one?
I don't have anything else. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you. And that is a true story.
Sure, Rachel.
I have a picture.
Give it forward, they said. It'll be great, they said.
We've heard your
That's why
talk.
That's true. Yeah.
We know it's all
We know the parts.
We'll bring this
I
back.
love her.
We'll bring this back to the second read with that adjustment.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Okay. Any other questions on that one?
I think it was okay.
Okay, we're good. And so the next policy up for first read is policy 6146, graduation requirements. So the last time this policy was revised was 10/22/18. Shipman and Goodwin have revised this policy in light of sections 10 and 12 of Public Act number 21-144, which repealed statutory provisions that permitted students to graduate high school upon completion of the academic advancement program. You will notice that the last paragraph in this policy is stricken, academic advancement program, as well as some technical edits, and also a shift in course credits for graduation requirements with classes graduating 2023 and thereafter. That was part of our current existing policy. As we take any questions, I also just want to remind the board, this policy is part of the 6,000 series, which is an instruction. So I would defer to administration to help clarify us any questions that we may have with the policy. Any questions?
I had a couple grammatical comments on it. We should, beside my obligatory Oxford commas, in that first, at the end of that first paragraph, we should refer to the board, the parenthetical reference, because we do call ourselves the board at the end, after Board of Education. Board. On page 2 in that last paragraph where we struck in accordance, completed satisfactorily. I'm not sure why that was changed. It almost seems like the preposition is missing. We have practically that same sentence towards the bottom of page 3, where we say in accordance with the board's online coursework policy. So I would recommend we just say that is in accordance with board policy there. And I'm not sure why in accordance was stricken and completed satisfactorily.
That's completed in accordance?
Sure, yeah, it's missing that.
So Sam, just so I understand, so you would like it to read that it is, can you say it one more time, that it is
Completed in accordance with
in
board policy.
accordance.
Yeah.
And take out satisfactory.
That's it. That's it.
Anything to talk about?
I'm through this.
And the board, in parentheses, goes after visual board education.
I would say parentheses, the board, in quotes, close parentheses, comma.
I would say that as well.
Any other questions on this policy? So the next up is policy 6146.11. This would be a new policy. It is weighted grading and calculation of grade point averages. Section 13 of Public Act number 21-199 revised the Connecticut General Statute 10-220G that a Board of Education must have a policy concerning the manner in which student grade point averages are calculated, including whether they are weighted or not weighted. Mr. Lett and her team constructed this policy accordingly for us this evening. Are there any questions?
Normally we refer to ourselves as the Richfield Board of Education, not the RPS Board of Education. I would stay consistent there. I would, in the second line, I would say the manner in which a student's grade point average is calculated, just so we can do a parenthetical reference to GPA, because we call it GPA further down. Continuing that, because now that we can do that, we can now use the manner in which GPAs are calculated in the district. And that last sentence of that first paragraph, since we now made reference to the abbreviation. That second paragraph, we're essentially, the first sentence and the third sentence are pretty much the same. I would suggest something due to the rigorous nature of select honors and college level courses. It is the policy of the Board of Education that grades earned in such classes deserve additional weight for purposes of calculating GPAs. And that is one sentence that takes place in those three. And I can type that out and send it to you.
Thank you so much.
That's easier.
I very much appreciate it.
Can I just ask a question on this one? This is the current method, correct?
Yes.
We're just putting it in a policy, because I
Yes.
guess this was the same as what was on Power School.
Right, so it also
Yeah.
pulled, we also had an existing policy, 6146.1.
Yeah.
They talked about grading in general. This one just pops out.
Yeah.
Weighted grading and really defines the different weights. And the high school did want to refer to their program of studies. So right now that includes the UConn courses for a college level course. So we didn't want to get too tight into which courses meant which, but I think it does a better job than our previous policy of really explaining to parents what to expect in terms of grades.
But it doesn't pop out what current practice is.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yep.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
And we're going to keep those pieces of the current policy that break referring to that.
So we're going to come back to the
With the
last
ranges.
policy.
Okay.
With that, because that one actually, we discovered, is only talking about grades 3 through 12.
Right.
So we're going to look at some more
Okay, cool.
general
Perfect.
grading policies to make sure
I
it's
know,
not.
I apologize for in this policy meeting also.
But that's why this one is named 6146.11.
Exactly.
Because it's long.
Subsection.
Yeah.
So these three will come back on with changes.
With changes for a second reading.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel.
If you don't get this by tomorrow.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, that's the end of the discussion items. We go 2 items of information, starting with the enrollment update.
Okay, so the enrollment as of April, you can see there are just a few slight in and outs at the K-12 level. As our patterns have shown, we are seeing the largest increase in the pre-K. So if we look at our totals from pre-K to grade 12, we are net 4 students. And we'll see that there's an increase in the 18 to 22-year-old program. So for our combined total RPS, we have 5 additional students from last month. Are there any questions about the enrollment?
Cue emoji head exploding.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Okay. Now the staffing update?
Sure. So you can see since the last Board of Education meeting at the end of March, any resignations or retirements that we've received, and any new hires that we have hired process since that time. We will be going into a season where you'll start to see increase on both of those sides in the future.
Okay. Thank you. That brings us to the correspondence to the board with public comment. Is there anybody signed up for the public comment section?
So, our correspondence report, we have received 2 emails since our last Board of Education meeting, 1 email regarding instruction and 1 email regarding curriculum.
Thank you. And we're at the bottom of the page where I say, do we have a motion to adjourn? Ken, can you get the second? All those in favor of adjourning, please raise your hands. Thank you all.
I have